you're engaged in the receiving stage of listening, you must focus on verbal and nonverbal cues. Oftentimes what we pay attention to is just the verbal. We don't pick up the facial expressions, the gestures, the posture that also give us additional information that could be helpful in us truly understand what's going on. The next tip for being a good receiver during the listening stage is to avoid distractions. For example, I was just on the phone with somebody and they were talking about something that I wasn't all that interested in, and so what I did is I got on my computer and I started emailing a student. Well, that is not avoiding distractions. That's actually giving way to distractions. Turning off the TV when somebody's talking to you, important to do. Putting down your phone, no more Candy Crush when somebody's telling you a story. You need to avoid distractions. Look at them and don't do anything else. And we're getting very, very bad about that in this time and place of our society. Next, focus on the speaker, not what you'll say next. So often when we're receiving a message from somebody, we think, oh, I can't wait until I can tell them my story. Or, oh, you know what, I should tell them this. When you're doing that, that's just as much as a distraction as your phone is, as the TV is. You're not focusing on their message, you're focusing on you. So make sure it's always your focus on them. Do not interrupt. Sometimes it is difficult not to interrupt because you've got information that you want to share and you could forget. But I would really, really urge you, avoid interrupting until the person is completely done. You may have to say, can I have a turn to talk right now, or are you still processing information and you would like to share more? That's a very, very helpful strategy to use, because that means when this person is done talking, I'm going to ask them if it's okay for me to speak. I'm not just going to assume it is. So really try to avoid interrupting. If you're going to forget what you say, maybe have a sheet of paper and jot it down so you don't interrupt them. When you're trying to understand at that stage, stage 2 of listening, avoid assuming you understand. Sometimes we go, yeah, I get it, when you don't get it at all. And what you need to do is say, okay, so let me understand, and using that paraphrasing to double check that what you heard is in fact what they meant. This is just a form of perception checking, right? Back from chapter 3. Check that what you understand or what you perceive to be their message is truly accurate. Relate the new information to what you already know. When you get new information, you should be able to stick it in a category in your mind of other like-minded information. That way you don't have all these little teeny tiny pieces of different information. You have bigger categories of information. So if somebody tells me something new about nutrition when you're training for a marathon, because that's what I'm doing right now, I'm going to take that information and I'm not just going to put it in my marathon training box of information. I'm going to put it into my fitness box. And that has a whole bunch of information in it, not just related to marathons, but all sorts of fitness information related to swimming and biking and eating and stretching and all sorts of other information. So try to relate so you have bigger classifications in your mind. Oh, wrong way. There we go, back on track. See the speaker's point of view. This is really difficult sometimes because our perception is so much of who we are. It's hard to identify what somebody else is saying, but if we can understand their point of view without clouding it with our point of view, we can become better listeners. Ask questions for clarification. What you should be doing is saying, this is what I thought you meant, but I'm not sure. And also ask for examples. Can you give me an example? One thing that couples don't do, especially if they're in conflict, is somebody will say, you've been being very short with me lately. I don't think it's problematic to say at that point, can you give me an example of a time recently when I've done that? Now, it can frustrate the other person, but assure them that all you're trying to do is understand. You are not trying to get out of the blame that they're saying or that they're trying to put on you, but what you are doing is saying, I just want to make sure I fully understand what my behavior looks like so that I can stop it, because if I don't know what it looks like, I probably won't be able to stop it. And then make sure you paraphrase the speaker's ideas. And what that means is you don't always have to verbalize it to them. Sometimes you do it internally, silently to yourself, so that when you review what they've said, it helps you to remember it, which is the next stage, but it also helps you understand it. And also, you can confirm your understanding to the speaker, and that's going to be important to do. And just say, so I hear you saying that you're angry at your neighbor, and they may say, no, that's not what I said. I said I was frustrated with my neighbor because they were doing that. I'm not quite angry with them. I'm just frustrated with it. Stage 3 is the remembering stage. And really what we do is we get caught up in the details of somebody's message, and we almost have information overload, and that we start to go, I can't remember all of this. So really just look for the central ideas. What is the main point that they're trying to make, and what is their major support? You don't have to remember every detail from every story, but just in a general way, what were they talking about? Summarize the message. Try to do that as briefly as possible. When you try to summarize, make sure you get it down to just a few things so that you're not trying to remember every single word. Just a brief summary, a one-sentence recap in your mind of what the message was about. Repeat names and key concepts. It's very important to do, especially names. It's so important to know the names of the people that somebody's talking about, so at a later time you can bring up that name. For example, the other day my husband said, well, there's this woman that I work with and she has a practice out in Glendale. And I said, oh yeah, Jamie, I know her. And he was very, very astounded that I remembered her name. And he goes, oh, you know Jamie? And I said, well, I remember that time you told me about Jamie and her husband opening that practice. And he said, yeah, I did. And he really felt cared about and appreciated. So it's a good way to show people that you're truly listening and you remember what they say. Your textbook shows a great acronym, which I'm going to call the Ch4 acronym, that will help you remember things. And I thought it was great. Lots of good tips in there. The F in Ch4 stands for focus, and that means just attend to the central ideas. The organize is the O in the acronym Ch4, F-O-U-R. Then you had unite the new with the old. And then repeat names and key concepts. So it's kind of what I've just gone over here, but instead of these 3 bullets, it's the acronym Ch4. Focus, organize, unite, and repeat. That may be a good way, again, to remember this material from the textbook because you have that acronym of Ch4, F-O-U-R. Stage 4 of listening is evaluating. This is where you judge the message in some way. You may try to say, is this information that I need to do something about? Is this bad information that I need to intervene before something worse happens? Is this just a story that somebody wants me to know because they want me to be entertained? What really is going on here? What do I need to evaluate? You may not always have to judge somebody or be critically evaluating what they've said, but it's important to make that distinction. Make sure that you resist premature evaluation, and that means make sure you fully understand the speaker's point of view. You have to ask questions. Don't label what they're saying. Hear the whole message out and then make an evaluation. And make sure it's a fair evaluation, not one that is filled with the schematas you already hold. Next is give the speaker the benefit of the doubt, and that just means that sometimes you have to distinguish facts from opinions. Oftentimes we talk like all things we say are facts, when really some of it is our opinions, they're not the facts. And distinguish facts from inferences. I just said that. The facts from the opinions is what you want to make sense of. And then identify any biases or prejudices that the speaker has. It doesn't mean you have to say, well, that's so prejudiced or that's so biased. You just need to identify them so that you have a context to refer to and say, well, they have a certain bias against the president and that's why they're saying that. Or they have a certain prejudice against those types of people, that's why they're saying that. You don't need to point it out, but identify it for your own purposes. Stage 5 is the responding stage, and usually this is the only indication that somebody has that you've listened, because this is your chance to actually say something in return. You may say, well, this requires a message construction. It has really nothing to do with listening. But the reason why it's included in the stages is nobody knows that you've listened effectively until they hear your response. So keep that in mind when you're doing your homework this week. is very, very important that your responses to the assignments when you're supposed to be listening follow the criteria here on page 91. So the first tip here is to support the speaker with back channeling cues. Back channeling cues are things like, oh, I see, oh my gosh, no way, no way. Whatever you say to show to the other person that you are listening is going to be quite helpful. Sometimes we forget to do this because we don't want to interrupt them, but it does show that you're engaged and listening. It varies from person to person. Some people give a good deal of back channeling cues. Typically, women will give more back channeling cues than men, but I know plenty of men that give more than certain women that I know. So it's important to be able to adapt to whoever you're talking to. So if you get no back channeling cues, it's okay. And if you get plenty, you also know what to do and it's not frustrating to you. They're simply trying to show you that they're engaged. Next is express support for the speaker, and that just means make sure that you truly make them feel like they're being heard, that you're listening, that you're paying attention, that you're taking what they say and you're evaluating it and you're making sense of it so that you can relate to them or help them or learn from them, going back to all those purposes. Respond honestly, even in disagreement. It's okay for you to say, well, I'm not sure if I agree with that or not, and here's why. It's perfectly okay to say that. Now, it's not okay to respond in a way that says, well, that's just wrong, because that doesn't show support for the speaker at all. Next, own your responses. Take responsibility for what you say. Don't say, well, nobody wants to do that, or I've heard lots of people that don't think that. Those aren't your responses. Those are about other people. So say, I don't think I'll do that, or I don't think that will work for me, or I don't feel that way. That way you're taking responsibility for your responses. Last but not least, provide a supportive atmosphere, and that just means, again, you're not playing with your phone. You're truly making eye contact with them. You're listening to both verbal and nonverbal, and you're not being a thought completer. You don't wait and see, okay, this is where they're going, I'm going to then jump in and complete their thought. Let them complete their own idea. Don't say, I already know what you're going to say, let me throw it out there, because it really doesn't support them in the way that they need to be supported.